Okay, so basically you have road signs, signals and markings, and then you have prohibition signs, reservation signs. Now that's the definitions. Now this is your sketches. So you have road signs, signals and markings, prohibition signs, reservation signs. And this is your drawings basically. Speed limit, maximum, which means that you're only allowed to go up to 100 kilometers per hour in that zone. Maximum limit, your mass limit basically, mass limit, which is 12 ton. So you're only allowed to carry 12 ton in that area. Then you have exile mass load limit. So your rear exile, which means your load that you can carry is only 2 tons. You can't carry more than 2 tons. Your height limit, which is 4.42 meters. So your vehicle or anything that you load shouldn't be higher than 4.42 meters when you drive in that area, because there might be like obstacles that's 4.42 or 4.45 meters high or 4.43 meters high, and you might crash into those objects. So the maximum height there is 4.42 meters. Then you have your length limit, which means the length of your vehicle can only be as long as 15 meters. So you can't go further than 50 or longer than 15 meters. So you can't drive a car that's 16 meters or a vehicle that's 16 meters long. Excessive noise prohibition or prohibited, which means that, okay, it's the sign, you're not allowed to, make excessive noise, which means you're not allowed to be loud in that area. Then we have hitchhiking prohibited, which is the sign there, you're not allowed to go and hike, which is basically where people have like their own pickup spots, like you're not allowed to usually when you go on a long trip, you go stand by the road and then you see where you can find lift. So basically it's just restricting you. It's not allowed to happen in that area where you see a sign like that. Then unauthorized vehicles prohibited. Let me just see. It's R2.08, unauthorized. So you don't have authority, or they didn't give you authority to drive in that area. Then that's when you see that sign. Usually, like for example, on a mine, you're not allowed to drive on a mine. So you're unauthorized to drive there. Then you will see a sign like this. If you don't have authority to drive there, then the sign will tell you you should have authority to actually drive in this zone. A left turn ahead prohibited. So it's the sign. So your left turn ahead. So which means that to follow, it's prohibited. You're not allowed to drive, or you're not allowed to turn left ahead. And then because you have right turn ahead prohibited, which is this one, you're not allowed to turn right ahead, and it's almost similar as this one, left turn prohibited. Now left turn, you get a left turn ahead, which means that maybe you see that sign like 30 meters before the turn, and then this one is when you see the sign on the turn, on that spot. So it's left turn prohibited. So you must just be careful because you get left turn ahead, and then you just get left turn prohibited. So your left turn prohibited looks like this, and your left turn ahead looks like that. So your left turn prohibited, which means that you're not allowed to turn left on that spot. Then you have your right turn prohibited, which is this sign here, which means that you're not allowed to turn right on that spot. So you have your U-turn prohibited, which means it's this sign, which means that you're not supposed to, or you're not allowed to make a 180 turn or U-turn in that area. Then you have your overtaking prohibited, all vehicles, so you're not allowed to overtake on that section of the road or in that area. Then you have overtaking by goods vehicles prohibited, so goods vehicles, they're not allowed to overtake you in that area. Then you have parking prohibited, all vehicles, you're not allowed to park there, which means you cannot park there. Okay, it's just a joke, but you cannot park there, and that's for all vehicles. And then you have stopping prohibited, which means you're not allowed to stop there. Then you have pedestrians prohibited, so people are not allowed to walk there. You cannot walk there. And then you have pedal cycle prohibited, so which means no bicycle is allowed to drive there. Then you have pedal cycle in pedestrian prohibited, which means people walking there and cycling there, they're not allowed to. Then you have motorcycles prohibited, which means that motorcycles are not allowed to drive there. Then you have motor cars prohibited, which means that motor cars are not allowed to drive there, which is a sign of a car, and then there's a red line drawn through it, so you're not allowed to drive there. So now you have taxis prohibited, which means that it's a sign of a car with that yellow cap on top of the car that says taxis, so it's not allowed to drive there. Basically your car taxis, or what we call Uber taxis. And then you have your minibuses prohibited, which means it's basically your quantum taxis in South Africa. They're not allowed to drive there or park there or whatever. And then you have your midi buses prohibited, which is these 22 seaters. They're not allowed to park or drive there. And then you have your buses prohibited, which is the big intercape buses or these big school buses. They're not allowed to drive or park there. And then you have your delivery vehicles prohibited, which is this one. So they're also not allowed to park or drive there. So the delivery vehicles and the goods vehicles, they're two different things. Delivery vehicle, you will see, it's usually basically these take a load vehicles, or like these huge trucks that's delivering something. But then you have your goods, so now you have your goods vehicles prohibited, which is usually it's enclosed. It has like a canopy, and the your, what do we call it, your delivery vehicle, it's usually open deck. So this one is a closed deck, open deck. So whenever you see a closed deck, you know it's goods vehicle. So this is goods vehicles prohibited. Goods vehicles prohibited. Goods vehicles over 10 ton prohibited. And when you come here, it looks like that. Closed deck, 10 tons. So it's a goods vehicle, and it's prohibited. Anything above 10 tons, it's prohibited in that area. Now you have your construction vehicles prohibited, and it's basically just a huge dump truck. It's prohibited. So you can see the sketch of the dump truck there. So now you have vehicles conveying, which means carrying hazardous substances, prohibited. So it's basically, it looks like a diesel bowl, a truck with a diesel bowl on, and yeah, it's prohibited. So it can't drive there or park there. Then you have abnormal vehicles prohibited, which is the sign here, AV, abbreviation of abnormal vehicles. So they're not allowed to park there. It's anything that drives or that actually has a overlap into the second field, or into the for example, if it's driving on the right side, then it's overlapping onto your right side of the road, then it's abnormal, because it's consuming space of your oncoming traffic lane. So that's abnormal vehicle, and then it's not allowed to drive there. Then you have rickshaws prohibited. Like, we don't have this in South Africa, so I don't know. Usually they have it in China, or I saw on the TVs, on the movies actually. And then you have your tour buses prohibited, which is this one. It's basically these large buses, intercape buses or school buses with a sign on top saying tour. So tour buses are not allowed to drive there or park there. And then you have your agricultural vehicles prohibited, which is basically a tractor and sign of a tractor that's not allowed to park there. And then you have your animal drawn vehicles prohibited, which is like what we call a donkey car or horse cars. They're not allowed to drive there, but that's basically some animal pulling a trailer. So it's basically an animal pulling a trailer. It's not allowed to park there or drive there. So now we go to reservation signs. Bus parking, reservation. So reservation just means to reserve that spot for something. So we're reserving that spot for bus parking. So bus parking reservation, which means that only buses can park there. So basically they are saying that only buses can park there. Bus lane reservation, which means that only buses can drive there. I think when you're in Cape Town, you get the metro buses. Like that spot, that lane is reserved for those buses to drive there, and only those buses. Then you have bus lane reservation begins, which means that it looks like you see it kinks towards your left. That one is a straight dot line or broken line. This one has a broken line, but it's making a turn here at the bottom, which means that it's just saying, okay, it's starting there. Your bus lane reservation begins there. So you have your parking reservation. It looks like that. So which means that it's reserved for parking. I think you should have permission also to park there. That's what parking reservation means. That spot is already reserved. Maybe if you're director of a company or something like that, you're employee of that company, and you already have permission to park there. Other people, like visitors or stuff like that, people that's just there to do business, they're not allowed to park there. So you have your taxi reservation, which means that that spot is reserved for taxis, car taxis in specific. It's only reserved for taxis, car taxis. Then you have your delivery vehicle parking reservation, which means that only delivery vehicles are allowed to park there. Then you have minibus stop reservation, which means that, so it is like the stop sign, maybe logo, and then it's a minibus, 22-seater. Actually not 22-seater. It's a normal taxi, quantum taxi. So that spot is like already reserved for stop. And then you have your bus stop reservation, which means that, okay, it looks like that. So which means that only buses are allowed to stop there. That spot is reserved for buses to stop there. It's usually your pick up or drop off points for buses. It's the same for mini buses. So with that said, we are done with this section. So we are moving on to the next one, and that's on my next video, on part 3, where we do comprehensive signs, selective restriction sign examples, the restriction signs. Like, we will go over all of them, and then also selective restriction sign combination examples, where they use them in combination. And that's on my next video.